For all those who are going to be on camera, please be aware that this event is going to be recorded. So if you would not like to be on camera, so that you are not recorded, please feel free to take yourself off camera. Okay, and so to that end, a very, very big warm welcome to you all. We are going to gently start to make a start to the event. And so thank you so much to everyone for joining us at today's debate. This house believes that race significantly impacts career progression. My name is Horatio, and I'll be taking you through the debate today. This event is brought to you by YDWC, and obviously, we are partnering with the University of Oxford to deliver this debate today. And this event is brought to you to really provide an opportunity for conversation, an opportunity to explore what we think is an incredibly important topic. So, as we begin today's seminar, we wish to flag a few items for your benefit. Firstly, we're not expecting a fire drill today, so if you do hear any loud noises, clearly it's not going to be a great situation, but we hope that you are safe and well. Secondly, if you need to use the loo, we are not sure where the nearest one to you is, but again, do feel free to use it at your convenience. Thirdly, we have no buffet today, but we do have social media. And so if you would like to tag us at YDWC or Said Business School, at Said Business School, or take part in the hashtag, which is hashtag FLA, hashtag YDWC FLA debate. We will put that up later. You're more than welcome to get involved there. So, as mentioned just before, for anyone who is just joining the call, this event is going to be recorded. We do welcome you to share any thoughts and reflections that you have as the debate goes on. We are incredibly excited to have all of you here today. So whether this is your first YDWC event or your 50th, we're incredibly happy to have you on the call and very, very excited to have the opportunity to be engaging with you at this particular moment in time. And so today we have a wide variety of really interesting things that we're going to be doing. We're going to be exploring the main debate which we've put forward, but we're also going to be creating an opportunity for you to share your insights, your thoughts. So do be aware that at the relevant moment, we will be turning to you to make sure that you have the opportunity to feed into this discussion. So, to that extent, we are going to move on a little bit and just speak to you about today's debate. So, as mentioned, the debate that we are going to be holding today is this House believes that race significantly impedes career progression. And to that extent, this is not simply about just having a debate for and against. It's really about opening up a conversation. It's really important for us to highlight that the debaters who are speaking today may not be representing their own specific view, but actually are trying to highlight ideas which will allow us to facilitate a much wider conversation. So please be respectful, please be open, and please be ready to engage in what should be a really interesting conversation. So, if we move forward slightly further, please. Today, we are going to be going into a debate with the following debaters that we have in front of you. But just before then, we are going to engage in an interactive poll. So I'm going to welcome all of you to go onto a site that is called mentimeter.com. And we are just going to start off with a really quick virtual poll before we actually jump into the debate. So I'm going to share my screen at the moment. And for everyone who is on the call, I'm going to kindly ask you to go onto a website that you can see on the screen. It is menti.com. And we just want to begin by making sure that everyone has an opportunity to express their view right at the beginning of the debate. So we're going to have a vote right now just to see where people stand before the debate has started. And then we're going to have another opportunity once more for people to be able to chip in again. You will see that the link is in the description. We will post it again for those who have not been able to see it. It is menti.com and the actual code is 66192811. So we're just going to give you a moment just to vote through that, and we're going to see where this takes us. Okay, so very, very interesting reflection so far. At this particular moment in time, with a few people who have uh, uh, submitted their responses so far, it seems to be the case that we are all siding towards yes, with most people believing that race does significantly impede career progression, with some people who are still on the undecided front, but a few more who are in the no space. So we're very, very keen to retest this later on and see how thoughts may change across the actual debate itself. So I'm going to bring that to a pause for now. And we're now actually just going to explain to you how the debate is going to work today before handing over to our keynote speaker, Dr. Jimmy, who is with us. And we're going to be very, very excited to be able to provide a very good overview there. So if we can have these slides back up again, please. Brilliant. So, for those of you who have never seen a debate before, there are two sides. A side who are in proposition, who are in favor of it, and a side who are going to speak in opposition. And it's our real joy today to be able to highlight a really exciting array of guests who we will be able to introduce a little bit further on. But for now, we're just going to quickly make a move on to the next slide, where we're going to again just flag to you the rules of how we're going to be engaging today. So if you do have any comments that you would like to make, we welcome you to raise your hands. If you are a part of the wider audience, there will be an opportunity where we are going to invite questions and reflections from all of you. But until then, please keep your mic on mute. And we do encourage you to use video if you would like to. But as we've mentioned before, it will be the case that this event is recorded. So please be very, very careful if it is the case that you do go onto camera. So today's event, we started off with obviously a very, very quick introduction and poll, and we found out that as it stands at the moment, most people are of the view that race does significantly impede career progression. Well, in a moment, I'm going to be turning to Dr. Jimmy Akaya, and she's going to be giving us a really, really powerful keynote opening speech. Then I'm going to be turning to the opening remarks for the actual debate, giving a little bit more context as to how we were going to take things forward before we have the main debate itself. And then we will have a closing poll and again, some further closing remarks. So without any further ado, it is my real pleasure to begin the debate by actually turning us to a really, really incredible speaker that we have. So Dr. Jimmy is a really accomplished speaker. She is an accomplished leadership and organized development consultant with more than 2 decades worth of experience. She is a highly experienced educator, trainer, and researcher with public and private sector experience of commissioning new and revalidated programs. She's a multi-sector psychology consultant focusing on well-being and human flourishing. She is a qualified psychologist who uniquely integrates positive psychology interventions with HR tools to achieve flourishing organization or progress. She has worked in a wide variety of areas: education, health, the third sector, aerospace, as well as other professional bodies. Her expertise includes leadership, organization, development, diversity and inclusion, workplace resilience, well-being, and women in leadership coaching. She's a project lead for the CMI Race 2020 Associate Program, leader of the MSc Human Resources Management, and chair of the Women's Network at the University of East London. She is a member of the Chartered Association of the Business Schools Race and Equity Action Group, member of the CMI Women, regional lead for the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion and Belonging Network, and she is also incredible person indeed. And so it was, without any further ado, I'm very, very happy to open up to Dr. Jimmy.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to join you all this evening. I'm really excited to listen to the debate, but also to contribute my research experience from the topic. Can I please have my slide up, if you may, please?
So which slide would you want? Because we've kind of put them into a different format, but all the information is there.
Okay, so I need it to be slightly bigger. So the fonts are very tiny. So I'm of a certain age, my vision isn't great. I would like to pretend I can see this, but I do need it to be slightly bigger.
Sorry, give me 1 second.
Thank you.
Bear with me.
No worries.
Okay, sharing now.
Thank you. That looks so much better. So I'd like to start by, introducing the topic. I know that the title of the debate is that race was significantly impede career progression. And what I've done as a way of preparing for this keynote speech is to look at what is the research telling us. And, the audience poll that was done as a way of preparing for this session, 72.8% of you indicated that career aspiration isn't something that is lacking for you. So you are all, the 72% of you are actually indicating that you have the aspiration to go as high as, being an executive, a board member. Research also aligns with that and indicated that 74% of, Black responded from the business in the community research that was done in August 2020, which is titled the Race Report and Black Voices. That report actually revealed that 72%, 74% of Black respondents actually are keen to progress in their career. That really aligns with what we found out with the poll from this audience. Now, ambition isn't a problem. Now, we're all very familiar with, the glass ceiling which women have had to deal with in their career. But actually, there is something called the concrete ceiling. This is the barrier that, the BME employees actually experience. Is a much tougher barrier. And this barrier actually limits how far employees from ethnic background actually experience in organizations. Actually, it's also been likened to the fact that the experience of BME employees is likened to being a labyrinth. So what do I mean by that? The way that individuals actually try to navigate their experience within organizations make it difficult for them to make that career progression. Several factors impede them, but race has actually been underscored by several researches that indicate that race is one of the cogent factors that actually limit the pace and the speed with which Black employees actually make progress. 29% of Black employees from the CIPD research that was done in 2017 revealed that the discrimination that they've experienced that is linked to racial factors has reduced their attainment. That also correlates with 56% of you who have taken the poll for this event, which means that the two combined factors shows that racial discrimination can actually slow down the rate at which employees can actually attain their dream aspiration within organization. BITC again, in that same report, revealed that 33% of Black employees indicated that ethnicity would limit their chances of moving their career. If we place that next to the 72% on the left-hand side of the screen, that's the result from the poll of this audience, again saying that race is likely to impact your career progression. So there is a lot of correlation and agreement from what you've indicated and what we're finding out from the research. So let's find out, why are individuals in organizations and saying something or raising up their voice to talk about their racial challenges in organizations? Next slide, please. So there are many difficulties that are linked to discussing racial challenges, especially in competitive environment. Individuals sometimes want to raise it, but there are many factors that militate against that. One of it is the hyper focus on performance and productivity. Competitive environment have this focus on, they're very driven around target performance and making sure that employees actually meet those targets. Those are equally very important, but individuals might be experiencing racial challenges, but they feel uncomfortable to actually raise those challenges because they don't want to be seen as they're using those challenges as excuses for not meeting the targets or the performance indicators that have been set for them. There's also this common experience of lack of psychological safety in very competitive environment. So competitive environment is an environment where individuals want to show vulnerability. Environments where we have psychological safety is an environment where individuals feel comfortable to take interpersonal risk. Is an environment where you can actually demonstrate inclusion and challenge situation when you see it. So lack of that psychological safety in competitive environment also limits the voice of employees from ethnic background. There is that fear of stereotyping. So individuals feel like there is that misunderstanding and that creation of stereotype that employees from BAME background, they fit a specific mold. So therefore people kind of step back and be reluctant to actually raise issues as that when they happen. And that fear of not wanting to fit into that mold keep people silent from actually sharing their experience. Again, that organizational culture and values that we experience in an organization could stop you from actually raising your challenges, or maybe maybe you're experiencing microaggression or lack of support. That can actually stop an individual from sharing what their experience are within the organization. If the culture of an organization doesn't look inclusive enough, or the values of the organization does not align with inclusion, it may actually stop an individual from sharing what they're experiencing. Also, it could be the fear of backlash or that internal isolation, because what normally happens is if an individual is branded as the individual that actually complains all the time and using racial comments to kind of highlight what their experience are, that individual might be isolated, actually maybe not included in high visibility projects that could actually move their career forward. And finally, we know that individuals from BME background usually are concentrated at the entry level in most organizations, at best maybe in the middle. If we look at the top executive level, we don't see that much representation there. So therefore, the conclusion from research is saying that there is that impoverished social capital. We don't have that connection to power. We don't have that connection and command to authority. Therefore, we don't feel that sense of confidence and agency to actually call out things and, speak up. Therefore, so we, go for the, easy and the convenient choice not to discuss the racial challenges that, we may be experiencing in our environment. The next one, please. So why should organizations nurture diverse talent? What's in it for them? Why is there an impetus to encourage organizations to actually make it a priority and focus on nurturing diverse talent? We know that nurturing diverse talent isn't just a business case. There are several evidence of, organizations where they have representation of, Black and ethnic minority at the executive level, that it does impact the bottom line. There is evidence of profitability, but it's not just the business case that we're looking at. We're looking at that moral imperative. It is a good thing to do. It also helps when organizations focus on nurturing the diversity of their talent pool. It helps to resolve the leaky talent pipeline. So this is where people leave the organization as a result of maybe experiencing unfavorable culture. When the culture is fixed and when the culture is inclusive, it makes the employee stay with them for longer. So retention is better, engagement improves, skill utilization is maximized. It makes individuals feel empowered. When individuals are empowered, they feel the confidence to innovate and look for creative solutions to problems. There's also that better organizational image. There is a report that was released by Forbes. It's called the Global Inclusion Workforce Report. That report actually indicated that 77% of organizations that took part in the survey for the research indicated that there is an increase in productivity in their organization because of the diversity of their workforce. But also organizations who already get the urgency and the importance of nurturing diverse talent, what they actually benefit from is growth within the organization, because they tap into the benefit of the talent and the skills of their staff, and also make use of that cultural experience, language benefit to access customer bases in international market. So what more can we say in terms of I'm talking about the benefit and the importance of nurturing diverse talent? So bottom line improves, you stay on the right side of the law, and it's a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jimmy. And I'm sure everyone, wherever they are right now, are giving you a really big virtual round of applause. Clearly an inspirational speaker. Dr. Jimmy was actually listed as among the top 50 inspirational Black women in the UK in 2019. We're incredibly happy to have had you open today's conversation. Thank you so much for that really, really insightful opener. And so, to that end, we're really, really excited to take today's debate forward. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a really quick overview of how the debate segment is actually going to work. So we have 4 debaters who we have flagged to you just before, and we'll bring them on screen again in a moment. But essentially, each of the debaters is going to be given 5 minutes to make the case for their side. So we will have 5 minutes for each speaker, and will alternate between the proposition who are for the motion and the opposition who are against the motion. What will happen is after 30 seconds, you will hear a clap, and that's me basically indicating to them that 30 seconds has gone, and then you'll hear another clap from me at 4 minutes 30. That's me suggesting to them that actually they have to be thinking about rounding up. At 5 minutes, you'll hear 3 claps. That's me indicating that the speakers actually have to stop. And at that point, we will be expecting that they end their remarks. Now, what we're also going to highlight is that later on in the debate, once we've heard from the first 4 speakers, I will then specifically turn to the audience. Everybody who is not listed as a formal debater will be given the opportunity to make their reflections. And we're really, really keen to ensure that as many of you as possible will be given an opportunity to input into the debate. Once that has happened, we will then come into our concluding speeches where there'll be a speaker from each side who will give a summary speech. Now, one final thing which usually delights people is during the initial speeches, the four speakers will be able to interrupt each other. Between the first 30 seconds and the last 30 seconds, they are allowed to give each other what are known as points of information. They will interrupt each other in a kind and polite way in order to kind of really ensure that they're engaging with both sides of the debate. So we are really happy to take any hands or questions that people may have slightly later. But for now, we are just going to quickly jump into the first speech, which will be from Kenza Wilkes. Now, Kenza is the founder of Code Blue Consulting, the captain of the 2016 England World Championship winning debating team, and we are so proud to have him to open the case for side proposition. This House believes that race significantly impedes career progression. Kenza, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Awesome. I'll get started then. As the corporate world comes to terms with the importance of diversity and inclusion, it looks as if change is slowly coming about. But to think that race no longer significantly impacts our career progression would be a mistake. It's a mistake because it's sadly not true, and believing that it doesn't undermine our ability to progress undermines our chances at truly fixing it. Two arguments in this speech then. Firstly, on how historical representation of minorities in the corporate world, and we're going to think about the institutions the workplace is truly built upon. Secondly, I'm going to look at the mechanisms that limit career progression of minorities in particular. But before I get on to that, what is our stance on the side proposition? Let's define some key terms and think about what this debate is really about. We on side proposition are well aware that there are myriad factors that can influence the likelihood of someone's career progression, whether it be their gender, their social status, their general aptitude, or actual desire for career progression. Our case is that race represents not only one of these factors, but is also one of the most significant hurdles and stumbling blocks that traps the success of racial minorities within the workplace and otherwise harms their career progression. Secondly, we would note that beyond terms like BAME, we understand the intersectionality of oppression faced by members of racial minorities. Given this, whilst race might play a discriminatory effect on both Asian and African Americans, this discrimination can play out in radically different ways. It is our case that even though the degree of discrimination might end up being different, in both cases, it still qualifies as significant. Let's look firstly then at the historical representation of minorities in the corporate world. We think it would be a mistake for us to approach this debate on a neutral footing. Rather, we should interpret it through the broader societal racism that exists and interrogate the structures and institutions that prop up the modern capitalist economy. These are not institutions that were made in our image, but rather in the image of those with power and those that represented the elite. The stings and legacy of the transatlantic slave trade remain all too fresh in our minds and in the statues that surround us. The treatment of Black people not as economic agents capable of career progression and agency, but instead as mere commodities. While slavery must be gone, violence is committed against our bodies on a daily basis, whether this be police brutality in the streets, discrimination and questions of our heritage, casual inquiries about how dark our baby's skin will be, systematic higher levels of poverty and lower levels of education. These are real and ever-present threats to Black people wherever we go, and the workplace is no exception. It would be a mistake for us to assume that the workplace is this bastion of progressivity in a world where everywhere around us the evidence is pointing in the opposite direction. These are realities that pay out in really harmful ways. Black people are less likely than their white peers to be hired, developed, and promoted. We've already heard some damning statistics from Dr. Jumi, but let me add some more. In the Fortune 500 companies, there are currently only 3 Black chief executives, which is down from a high of 12 almost 20 years ago. By this measure, if anything, we've regressed in terms of opportunities for career progression, not progressed. In the US, 2.4% of the executive committee of finance companies are Black. That's down to 1.9% for tech executives. What does this ultimately mean for our opposition in this debate? It means that we should all be starting from a position of race significantly impacting career progression. It is the opposition's burden to prove that something has changed over the past 60 years, and magically that is no longer the case. The evidence doesn't look great for side opposition. Let's think secondly then about the structures that inhibit the progression of Black and minority ethnic employees. Often we know the common phrase that it's not what you know, but who you know. Connections facilitate entrance, but also, more importantly, the progression that follows within these companies. It's common knowledge that you need to be able to play the system. And sadly for that, Black people are given fewer cards to play with. And to be honest, I was never even that good of a poker player. But in many cases, it's not even your poker skills that matter. What most of us are missing is an invitation to the table in the first place, tucked away in golf clubs, or visible but just out of reach for those without the right social connections. Secondly, so often we're met with dog whistles of you weren't quite the right fit, or you couldn't connect with the clients, or how could they be trusted with such responsibility? Black people on account of their race are often overlooked and treated with microaggressions that undermine their career progression. Thirdly, we think there are a series of internal biases that make it such that even when there are opportunities, and without seeking to generalize, there's an issue about how risk-averse Black people can often be in trying to reach out for these opportunities. Often Black employees report lower levels of confidence speaking up in meetings. Black executives report higher rates of imposter syndrome and a lower willingness to take big risks as a fear that they might end up harming their career, and they know there isn't a safety net waiting for them if they fall from the trapeze. The pressures that act upon minority individuals within the workplace are significant, and they significantly undermine our career progression. This is a fact that we cannot forget, and is why we're so proud to stand on side proposition.
Once again, a really, really big thank you to Kenza for what was a really powerful opening to the proposition case. And so, on that basis, we're very happy to turn our attentions to the next speaker, who will be our first speaker from side opposition. So we have Joshua Ashworth, who is currently working in the civil service, was a graduate in history, and has lots of international debating experience, and is, by all accounts, an incredible person. So to that extent, very, very happy to hand over to Josh to open the case for side opposition.
Can I just do a quick comms check? Am I audible?
Yes.
Super. I'd like to apologize preemptively for any background noise. My washing machine is on in the back. This is the problem with home working. I sincerely apologize. Super. Kenza is correct that race has an impact on career progression. But I'd like to point out that 30 to 40 years ago, racism and workplace discrimination was a tangible monstrosity with racial minorities without the legal, social, economic, and political capital to deal with its viscerating effects to any degree. Now racism operates in the shadows that they like to call subconscious bias, holding people back rather not as a palpable force, but as a state of mind for selectors for promotion and those interviewing at all levels. The question of this debate that we want to raise from side opposition is ultimately whether we ought to be afraid as a community enough to perpetuate a mindset that says, no, you can't enter those fields. No, because of race and things outside of your control, you are incapable of going about things this way. Or whether we tell individuals, actually, race should not be viewed as an inhibitor, and you will give it your best shot in every single circumstance, and actually your ability as a human agent shines through. Because it's actually the proposition case that diminishes you down to the color of your skin, rather than no thank you, recognizing your agency within. I'm going to run three things within this speech with rebuttal integrated. The first, on how the emphasis on race creates a significant issue for impeding the choice of individuals and the feeling of agency. The type of thing that means that so many people in the playground do not even think about options like the civil service or like being in a managerial position because they don't see anyone else like them. But importantly, it is such a significant issue that there never ever would be. No, thank you. Second, on why you have greater access to structures that you otherwise would not have in a world in which you make this less significant. And third, on you have a greater ability to demonstrate a value add important in leadership. First, on the emphasis of racial prejudice that harms the will of individuals, I want to paint 3 pictures for what this looks like. First, it looks like young people indoctrinated with a narrative whereby their race is predicating for a huge amount of their existence and life, where they feel afraid to go out and be themselves, to be characterful. They feel afraid to apply for opportunities, to look at the extracurricular things on board and not see anyone with their race, because that's something that simply does not happen. Second, when coming to apply, they see the statistics, and they see statistics headed up by racism being such a significant issue that actually the majority of them would never ever get through those places to begin with and feel ingrained in those structures. Third, they see in their job opportunities no other people that look like them, but the feeling that they cannot change that, and the feeling that their agency as an individual isn't something that happens. Why is this material that uniquely falls on our side? The first argument we raise is the point where you receive knockbacks in the form of horrible bosses that you will work under at various points in your life, where you receive knockbacks based upon feedback out of control that you feel like you do not have, such as you being too enthusiastic or parts of your character exuding too much. That can be ultimately paralyzing. But it becomes more paralyzing, and that is something you inexplicably draw down to your race, something that you have no capability to change, and something you feel as though inhibits your ability to exercise any level of will, that harms your confidence to such a great degree that is irreconcilable. I'll take you in a second. The second is the choice to curtail, the choice to be more like your white peers that are doing things such as thinking in a more conventionally white way, or having interests to fit in rather than being yourself because you feel like those are the only opportunities that you have of being able to step in this way. What does this lead to? 1, less people applying to begin with to these positions because they feel as though they simply cannot and will simply never happen. 2, people being forced to be personas within work for career progression because it is flagged as race being such an issue they have to curtail themselves. And third, more importantly, it being done in such a way, I'll take you in a moment, that you feel as though you have no agency within that situation. 2 things as to why this improves, but before that, Kenzie.
To be clear, is your case that we should lie to Black people about the challenges that they know are real in the workplace in order to boost their confidence? And if so, how is that going to encourage us to solve the problems you've acknowledged are real?
Let's be really clear. We are not lying about these problems. We are just not saying that they are so inhibiting and so significant that you feel like you cannot overcome them. Because, Kenzie, let's be real. The ability to access these kinds of things as someone who went to a private school background and has the ability to have those networks is very different to what it looks like in the streets of an academy school where you feel as though you do not have those capabilities because you do not see these things as right. And I think this leads to 2 things under our side. The first is the ability to have networks that solve these kinds of issues. The reason why charities like RARE and Horatio's organization pop out is because they recognize that these kinds of things are an issue, but an issue that you have agency around to be able to solve. More on that in my summary. But second, your ability to exercise your own value add within the workplace, to be your own version of yourself, to contribute your own diverse thoughts, and do so in such a way that you do not feel as though that would be an inhibitor to future progression within your career, but in fact something you're able to own and feel confident in its own right. And for that reason, the reason of not feeling like you have to be someone that you're not, and not play into the imposter syndrome that proposition wants to prevent, I strongly urge you to side with UP. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for an impassioned opening speech on the side of opposition. Really, really great start to the debate so far. So just as a quick reminder to our audience, we've got 2 more speeches before we're going to be opening up the floor and turning to some of you for your reflections. But before then, it is a real pleasure to be able to hand over to Kiana Williams, who is a creative and social tech entrepreneur, voted the top 100 young future leaders in 2018, and a future trainee at a Magic Circle lawyer. So to that extent, very, very happy to hand over to Kiana.
Thank you very much, Horatio. I just want to check that you can see and hear me because my screen has a very interesting setup right now.
We can indeed.
Awesome. Cool. So I have quite a bit to say, so I'll make sure I time myself, as Josh gave us a very interesting opposition opening. So my name is Kiana Williams, as Horatio said, and I'm the second speaker for the proposition. And so I think, as Kenza did so wonderfully, really defining what we mean by significant. And if we go into the dictionary definition, a very neutral stance, neither proposition or opposition can take this, we see that significant is defined as sufficiently great or important, worthy of attention, what Josh seems to want to dismiss, and noteworthy. And with such an definition, it's very hard to see how the opposition argument stands as a whole, or how anything Josh has presented with us can stand too. It also seems very hard to support side opposition, given what we've heard from the wonderful Dr. Jumi. And the very real life experiences we've all had in the workplace. And so to suggest that race is not significant and it's not an obstacle when we consider career progression seems rather strange. Because if race constantly impacts our progression in every other area of society, from our health to education to daily living and safety, what makes us think that in our career, another microcosm of society, that would be any different? And so before I get into my 2 points today discussing cultural capital and this notion of diversity recruitment, all the wonderful agencies we've seen and organizations that are doing phenomenal work, I want to just address a few of the points Josh raised. You see, as Kenza said, this seemingly different model is almost insulting, because to suggest that racism operates in the shadows and to assume that those shadows are not real just doesn't seem to make sense. Because whilst the shadow may not be a physical thing that I deal with every day, I can definitely see it and I can definitely experience it. And see, what Josh is suggesting is that we continue the status quo that unfortunately the UK has done, of operating and treating racism like the boogeyman under your bed, rather than a real, genuine, imminent threat and a monster that continues to be destructive and continues to impact our daily lives, our careers, and the things that we do. And so this notion that on side proposition we are emphasizing the prejudice is false. And what I'd like opposition to do, in fact, is to bring to us an actual tangible and acceptable model, like we are saying on side proposition, which is recognizing the issue, recognizing the core that is detrimental, and finding a solution to that. Because if we continue to pretend that it's not a thing, if we continue to pretend that something that is a very big threat and continue, Joshua, I'll take you in a sec, what we actually do is make the situation far worse. And so overcoming racism and overcoming these things in the workplace is not by pretending that it doesn't exist. Because a young child, whether you're in a private school or an academy, you will always know you are Black. And you will always know if you are Asian, you will always know what your race is. And whether someone tells you or you experience it by how they treat you, that's a different thing. Joshua, go ahead.
Sure. At no point in my speech did I not regard racism as an issue that people face. The case was that if you make it seem such that it is so significant, how do you expect any individual person to feel like they can apply for these jobs or apply for career progressions?
Okay, awesome. That's a fantastic point. You see, here we go. Herein lies the flaw again, because it is a significant thing. And you on your side seem to be placing the burden on the individual, when in actuality, the burden is on the organization. The individual is within their right to recognize that I am the race that I am. But the reality is, pretending that isn't the case isn't what we need to do here. We need organizations to recognize their cultural bias, where they are racist, where they are not inclusive, where diversity is tokenistic. We don't have time for that. And so I move on to my 2 points. Firstly, in regards to cultural capital, again, side opposition suggests that there is this huge difference between the private school and the academy. And I say where cultural capital is simply this idea as defined as providing children with essential knowledge to prepare them for a future of success, or equally translating and providing adults with the best possible start to their career. There are many Black people who have cultural capital, but they are still not directors. They are still not executives. They have gone to the private school where they should have the connections and are still not at the top. So what do we say here? This cycle that we supposedly have of cultural capital being the real obstacle just doesn't seem to stand. And so the foundational point remains that race is the issue here, because if someone with cultural capital is still not at the top, then what could be the difference? And I move on to my second point rather quickly, is that Joshua brought up these organizations like RARE and all these phenomenal things, and I will wrap here. And I will say this may be true, but as Dr. Jumi told us, that these organizations deal with this entry level. But Black people and Asian people weren't just born yesterday. Didn't just exist yesterday. So why is it that there are still, according to Forbes, no Black chairman, chief exec officers, or chief financial officers in any of Britain's 100 largest companies? I summarize on this, that this is not a discussion just about intersectionality. This is not a discussion just about class or culture capital. All these things are important. All these things are significant. But what we say on side proposition is the common denominator that exists again and again, where we know that people are intelligent, where people do have the connections, where people are being represented, where people are doing the work. The common denominator remains that it is race. And for all those reasons, we ask you to support the proposition and recognize this harsh reality that race does significantly impede our career progression. And when we recognize this, then we can create organizations where individuals can all progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much for an incredibly powerful and impassioned speech, Kiana. So, to that end, very, very happy to call upon our next speaker. And just as a reminder, after this speech, we will be opening up to the audience. You will be given an opportunity to ask your questions, make your suggestions, and we're really interested to hear from you. So get those questions ready, get those hands up at the relevant moment, and we will come to you. But before then, it is our pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is the current Oxford Union president, a history and politics student at the University of Oxford, and an international debating coach. It's our pleasure to hand over to Adam Roble.
Hey everyone, can everyone hear me? Yeah? Awesome. Let me just time myself as well. Over the summer just gone, shortly after the murder of George Floyd, I saw a post on social media that began to outline some statistics around the Black experience in the UK. It read as follows. As a Black person in the UK, I experience an act of racism every day. I'm 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched, 3 times more likely to be arrested, and more than 5 times more likely to suffer police brutality. I have to make myself smaller or be labelled as an angry Black person. With a degree, I'm still paid 23% less than my white peers. I regularly hear the words, I'm not racist, but up until 2015, my taxes were paying 46,000 slave owners to compensate them for the loss of human property. In detailing this, and in my own personal experiences, I can acutely understand why some Black people in particular, but people of ethnic minorities in Britain as well, believe and see race to be a significant inhibitor. However, in this kind of opposition case, I'm going to bring you 2 major points to begin to kind of show you that there is another dimension to this that we're not yet entirely considering, that Josh has began to touch on. Firstly, that the framing of race as what, not just who you are, is thoroughly detrimental. And secondly, and crucially, that there are significant intersections that are ignored in the totalizing nature of this motion. But before then, I'm going to go on to some rebuttal. We are told by the team in proposition, is it the case that we should lie to people about the very real problems that they face?
Information.
This. No, thank you, Kenza. 2 responses to this. On opposition, we say that when we see race as something that is super significant, constantly and consistently, people can begin to curtail themselves. Not writ large, broadly speaking, but the people we should care about the most in this debate and in
Points of information.
are the most beaten down by this narrative. Second thing on this is that this isn't about seeing a Black banker and then immediately aspiring to be a banker yourself per se, but it's about the harder to see lines. It's about the kid who now feels able to aspire to be a teacher, a nurse, or a care worker when they didn't necessarily see themselves able to do so before. This debate shouldn't just be a fixation of those at the top, but the people who gradually work their way up, and the people who still kind of achieve significant outcomes. In terms of my arguments, my first argument, that race is not in and of itself something that we are identified within constantly, but something we are in and of ourselves. Without getting too much into kind of the philosophy around this revolves around agency, as you were told by Josh. This is about the individual, not just the ways in which they're demonized, for instance. I find it paradoxical when we hear from proposition constantly about this idea of the individual and what the individual is, and et cetera, and the implications of this motion on them. But similarly, when they place this side by side with an inescapable meta-narrative and this inescapable narrative that things are so fundamentally broken constantly,
What information
of truth within. No, thank you, Kenza. I personally would have never expected to be in the situation that I'm in now as president of the Oxford Union, coming from the background that I did, growing up on free school meals, being in a kind of inner city London council estate, et cetera, et cetera. By many ways, given the nature of the status quo, I've been set up to not be able to do certain things, for example. But how does agency come into this? How does the individual in this context and this conversation about race and progress come into this? This debate isn't about cherry picking examples when we all know. Thank you, Kiana. Luck and fortune is something that is really important, but it's instead about the impact of these narratives and their tones that we put across that is really, really significant. We shouldn't see this as something that is static or pejorative. In terms of my second argument, Kiana says that we must recognize the issues here. Let's do that. We're told that this debate isn't just about intersectionality, but surely in conceding that, we also concede that it is about intersectionality, but it's about so much more than that. Significant intersections are ignored as a result of the nature of this motion, namely class and gender.
Point of information.
The extent to which somebody is able to buy their way out of certain degrees of kind of oppression, for instance, when you look at, in particular, like really rich ethnic minority families, for example, is something that's really important as well, because it shows that people don't necessarily experience things in the same way. I do understand that there is a limit, there is a boundary that exists somewhere, but that's something that isn't necessarily accounted for. Even more so, let's look at this in the example of gender, for example. In the example of the de Graaf and Reed v. General Motors.
Point of information.
No, thank you. Let me finish this point, then I'll take it. In the de Graaf and Reed v. General Motors case, we are told that it was basically the case that black women attempted to kind of take General Motors to a court case upon the nature of discrimination on an intersectional line. Black men worked on the production lines. Oops, sorry, my phone's bugging out. Black men worked on the production lines, and there were white women working in administration behind the desks. Discrimination there was seen on a sort of one-dimensional level, and this is something that is thoroughly detrimental and outdated. I don't think we have a complete picture when we don't acknowledge the bigger picture. I'll take your point, Kiana, before concluding.
See, Adam, so whilst on side proposition, we recognize that intersectionality is a thing, and you mentioned very wonderfully gender, but we see the progression of white women compared to black women, given that their gender is the same. The only denominator which suggests there is difference and has impeded their career would be their race. The same goes for the fact of black men, who some may versus white women. We still see many white women superseding the impacts and the efforts of black men. And there we have a true intersectionality at play, where we have the so-called male privilege, but coupled up with being black, and we have white women. And we once again see that the overriding factor in that regard, once again, is race. So how do you answer that, Adam?
The way in which I answer that is, I think there's a quote by can you guys hear me? Sorry, my phone keeps cutting out. There's a quote by Audre Lorde. I'll wrap this up. I know. But there's a quote by Audre Lorde, and it's about somebody not being free even when the shackles of oppression on somebody else are still kind of in place. I think the point there is that in order to have this conversation validly, we also need to look at every single aspect of it. That's something that we neglect when we don't look at intersectionality. I'm going to conclude very, very quickly before sort of finishing my speech. One of my favorite songs, broadly speaking, is the song Black by Dave. I'm going to read a brief excerpt of it, and then I'll conclude there. It says something along the lines of, black is pain, black is joy, black is evident. It's working twice as hard as the people you know you're better than, because you need to do double what they do so you can level them. This emphasizes the point that since we live in a world that is so unequal, a world that has a glass ceiling for people from so many minority groups, a world that forces not just my parents, but the parents of so many of my friends who are black to perpetually, from even a young age, extend the idea that as a young black person, you need to work double just to get the same chance. But this world, indeed, is one that is worsened with the conceptualization that race always, consistently, and forever will be a significant impediment, which is something that is strongly implicated in this motion. Thank you.
Thank you to Adam for a very, very powerful speech. And on that basis, we've heard some really interesting opening speeches from our debaters, and we're now very happy to turn to some of you. So as has been highlighted in the chat, we have a Q&A which is open, and you're more than welcome to share your questions via Q&A, and you will see also coming up on the screen, we will be sharing those questions that you are putting forward. But I can also see that there is a hand that has been up for a while, and it's Ubaid. Sorry, um, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but I do welcome you to ask your question or put forward your comment if you would like to do so.
Thank you very much. Obeyed is, yeah, you pronounce it very well. My question is, I come from a field, I work in policing, so there's a massive work being done in policing across the country called positive action, and it's all aimed, people like us, I would argue it's aimed at race to get more black people and particularly black women into policing. So that positive action, some could argue actually it's race that's actually increasing people's chances, black people's chances of actually progressing in a career in policing. I'm a disabled LGBT person, and I would argue that positive action is not actually being offered to people who are disabled or you know, or their sexual orientation or gender identity, but more is aimed at race. So my question back to those who support this argument is, what about positive action where it's aimed at particularly about race? It's not impeding there, it's actually promoting and progressing there.
Really,
Hope that makes
really,
sense.
absolutely, incredibly insightful point. Thank you so much for sharing. And to that extent, if there's anyone else who does have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands or to comment, and we will come back to you. So I can see, great, more hands have come up. We will come to them in a moment. Whilst we're doing that, I'm just going to quickly read some of the questions that we've got on the screen at the moment. So the first question or comment is, generational trauma means that our parents have passed down their own experiences and we now live with their struggles vicariously. There is a difference between perceived disadvantage and real disadvantage. Very, very interesting point. And next point we have is, whether I want to believe I am capable or it is possible to reach the top, if those who are managing me are biased, I will always be impeded. Again, very, very interesting point. So the concluding speeches will address some of those, but at this moment in time, I'm going to hand over to Oren, please.
Hi, Horatio. Thank you for that. I think this is a really interesting to hear both sides of this, actually, and thank you for sharing them. One of my points is, in a society like Britain, which I think is incredibly, your race can definitely impact on your life chances, as does your social class. And I think if we ran this looking at the percentage of white working class people in very similar positions, it might be the same. And I think that's linked to the fact that certain groups, and it will be the case for white working class people, lack access to social capital. So I'm trying to understand, is the issue race or is the issue class and social capital? And I haven't really heard much of that in the course. I'm really intrigued to hear from the presenters as to their view on that.
Really, really fantastic insight there. Thank you so much, Oren. And on that basis, very, very happy to turn to Wanu, please.
Hi, please let me know if you can hear me.
We can.
Yes. The question I have for the side that says it's not really significant, I'm still struggling to understand what the main point is for saying that it's not significant. Because currently I'm hearing arguments for why other things could be just as significant or also part of the package. But I really am yet to hear a very isolated argument as to why race itself is not significant, depending on how that's defined. Yeah.
Fantastic point. Thank you so much for raising it. And I'll go to our next hand. Again, please accept my apologies for any mispronunciation. Mamona, please.
Hi, thank you. First of all, thank you, everyone. I've really enjoyed hearing both sides of the argument. My question is, well, I was really interested in what Kenza was talking about in relation to the system having been built but not in our image, and that it's really difficult to separate the beginnings of capitalism from the transatlantic slave trade and imperialism. And my question is really, do you think that it's possible, based on the fact that capitalism is based on asymmetric power relations, so whether that's between people at the top or people in entry-level jobs, or the global north and the global south, etc., do you actually believe it's possible to create equality without dismantling the whole system and having something alternative in place?
Really, really powerful point. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so, just to flag, if there are any further raised hands, please, if anyone else would like to ask any questions, please raise your hands now, because we are going to be going back into the debate really shortly. So this will be your final opportunity to either raise a hand or to make a comment. So I'm just going to quickly tap into the remaining comments that we have on screen. So it suggested that the workplace is awakening to the need to address racial inequality. How can BAME staff use their race to their advantage? It's also suggested, when we talk about race holding us back, is this truly about someone's physical features or other possibly correlated factors, background, class, education, networks? Really, really interesting points there. And I'm seeing two questions, two hands raised. So I'm going to go to these hands. And if by the end of these we don't have any more, we will proceed back to the debate. So I'm very happy to turn to Dom, please.
Hi, Horatio. Great session today. Thanks for doing such a fantastic job. My point is that race as a construct was invented in order to validate disadvantaging one person versus another based on the color of their skin. To ask if race impedes is to not understand the very purpose of race itself.
Very, very powerful point, sir. Thank you so much. And to Joanna, please. Joanna, if you're speaking, we can't hear you at the moment. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Again, such a, great to be listening to this debate. And, it's quite clear that the speakers on all sides are definitely forging a career within their own fields, and just feel so pleased to be a part of the conversation tonight. But my question is a simple one when it comes through the eyes of working for corporate. Is it not just simply a case of we don't know that there is a game and we don't know how to play the game, and it's got nothing to do with race? Is my question.
And a very, very fascinating question indeed. And so on that basis, we go to our final question from the audience before we will turn to our concluding speeches. We will be hearing in reverse order from the opposition summary and then the proposition summary. So before I turn to Serena, we've just got another question that's come through. When talking about race, we forget to highlight that not all BAME people suffer the same experiences. Are Black colleagues specifically at a disadvantage to the rest of the minority population? So to that end, to Serena, please.
Hi, hello everyone. Just want to say also it's just been such a wonderful evening. Wonderful to hear all your insights. So, this is kind of my line of work. So I work in diversity, inclusion and equity, and what I have observed, so I agree with everyone, there's truth in everything that's been said, but an observation that I've made, and this isn't so much a question, but everything in this life is about relationships. And the more senior you get within a business, it is more about the relationships actually that you have rather than your skill set. Where does that also, I suppose that obviously sits within social capital and networks and all of that. So as I say, it wasn't really a question, but more just a statement.
Well, a really, really useful statement indeed. Thank you so much for sharing it.
You're welcome.
And so to that end, I'm just going to very, very quickly turn to the final question or comment that we have. Class and social capital are affected by race. I don't understand why we are separating it as if race doesn't impact class, etc. Awesome. So having said that, we could be here for an extended period of time, but I know we all have other things to do after this debate. So to that end, I'm going to close the question and answer session for now. And it's my real pleasure to turn to Josh to close the case for side opposition in summary.
Perfect. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
The two contributions on opposition that we've made in this debate are as follows. The first is if people feel like an issue is so significant, they feel like they can't overcome it. They feel as fear of it at every single turn in life, whether you be trying to get a job, trying to get promoted with a job, or do all of those things. And it stops you from wanting to do all of those things. Because let's not forget, the mantra for women used nowadays is yes, she can. Yes, she has the ability to go out and strive for the thing that she wants. Sporting, working, whatever that may be. But unfortunately, for some communities, specifically the Black community, I feel that that mantra does not exist to the same extent, and it stops people being themselves at work, trying to push their career to new levels, and doing all the things that they could to advance. The second is that if you highlight the significance of a specific group, it separates them from other disadvantaged groups and stops them collectively coming together with LGBT people, with people from lower financial backgrounds, with all of these other groups, and instead splinters and divides, only seeking to hurt both in this regard. First, who develops greater change in this debate? Because government's claim here is that racism exists and is everywhere structured within our society. There are two problems with this. The first is that there is no structural mechanism given to us by proposition on why that changes, specifically on an individual basis. Because let's not forget, when you go into a boardroom for promotion and you are faced with the shadows of some conscious racism dealing with you within that boardroom interview, you might feel like you're not in a position to take that on. You might feel like that is too much for you, and a narrative that confirms that only makes that worse and only makes it far more powerful. Whereas under our side, we free up the agency for individuals to do this in two regards. The first is it gives them the scope to push forward, to emphasize their difference in a way that is productive. And my personal example here comes from working with people going on to the summer diversity internship at the civil service, where they feel as though their examples of things that they've done within their community, which might be doing takeout, it might be helping out their family, is not a legitimate argument to use for showing a competency or showing an ability. When actually, in reality, these are some of the most powerful and meaningful ways to explain their experiences and to explain that they have the skills to do their job. The reason when I ask them, why didn't you mention that within the interview, is they say, I don't think that's what they are looking for. They being the white people that they are looking to please within these boardroom interviews to begin with. It stops people, as pointed out excellently within a question, from demonstrating that value add. The second thing it does is it stops long-term change happening. It means that averagely, some individuals will slip into the top 3 companies, but there's never concerted change through the middle and from the middle through the top. And the way in which that happens is by galvanizing a group of people and making them feel as though they're capable of doing this all collectively. The second thing to point out here is that you get less of a creation of the networks and structures that exist. The whole point is, at the point where you have some people within that position of power and a growing impetus to say that these groups should increase, that's when you get more collective social capital. Contrast that with opposition's world, where at the point where you say that race is a significant issue, and people from poorer backgrounds say, hold on a minute, what about us? People from locations outside of London that tend to get less government funding say exactly the same. People from LGBT backgrounds say exactly the same. All of a sudden, instead of having a unified group trying to fight against the oppression that all of them face, albeit in different ways, but all of them face collectively, they're at each other's throats, which is exactly what the managing positions want, exactly what people who are dominating the society want, and exactly what we seek to change through sustainable measures. The second thing on intersections, opposition say, well, look, lots of women, for example, do face problems, but Black women face significantly more than white women, and there are very little other differences. I think that is the problem with the very mentality we have at the moment, which is it boils people down to the way in which they look, rather than the class they come from, rather than the location that they feature from, rather than the indiscriminate things that means that beautiful women are more likely to be preferenced by men who view them as a prospect for those kinds of things, unfortunately said. As Ubaid pointed out, it's important we recognize that that support exists elsewhere, with movements supporting each other and beyond. Therefore, where does the most positive action happen? It happens in a world in which people are unified to say we are all facing disadvantage, but we want to sponsor each other, we want to help each other, and we want to go against that, rather than one where people feel divided and so they have to compete for their own significance to begin with. To make people feel empowered and to make people stand a chance of fighting these systems, it's important that you recognize that they have the ability to do so, rather than their race being the debilitating factor that means that they never will. The boogeyman that at the end of the day is going to catch them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for a very, very powerful close to the opposition case. And on that basis, it's my real pleasure to bring to the floor Kenza to close the case for the side proposition and for the debate as a whole. Kenza.
Let's not let side opposition forget, and us forget for that matter, what this debate is truly about. This debate is a question over facts, and it's whether or not Black and minority ethnic individuals are significantly impacted by their race in the workplace. We've been consistent on side proposition in painting a picture for you for why that has both been true historically and is likely to continue to be true, and that only through a true recognition of the power of these barriers against people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds can we truly pursue the kind of policies that are most likely to solve these entrenched biases and harms. I think this debate can be summarized into two questions. Firstly, are there historical barriers that act uniquely against Black and minority ethnic individuals in the workplace? And secondly, under which side are we most likely to affect change? Let's look firstly then about historical barriers. We at the very beginning of this debate established the idea that the workplace is based on institutions that were not created in our image. And note crucially that the racial dimension of capitalist oppression is a function of history and convenience. It is a function of how do we best separate labor into those that we can empower and those that we can oppress. And so frequently that has been entrenched upon racial lines. We think it would be naive for us to assume that the kind of abuse that has been accrued over generations and centuries has been wiped away somehow in the past 60 years, as side opposition would lead you to believe in this debate. But we do get some pushback here. We get a suggestion in one of the questions that actions like positive discrimination might actually empower Black people in the workplace and mean they're being overly advantaged. Unfortunately, this question overlooks the fact that only a handful of cherry-picked minorities are to the benefit of positive discrimination, whereas the vast majority of us do not get the career progression that we hope and that we deserve. Opposition more broadly in this debate took a bit of a strange strategy. They said we should tell people that the abuse they're facing is insignificant, so they still try and they won't give up. There are a couple of problems with this idea, though. The first is that it wasn't mutually exclusive to motivating individuals to also tell them that there are real and present dangers that you're going to face and that nonetheless you should try to overcome. If anything, this policy looks like more like gaslighting Black and minority individuals into believing that the suppression doesn't exist when they know it to be true and they know themselves to be experiencing it every day. Sadly, belief isn't quite enough. Side opposition's policy is akin to sending a firefighter into a burning building with the belief of yes, you can, and yet failing to equip them with water to put out the fire or safety equipment to keep them safe or hazard pay for the danger that they're taking upon themselves. We think that Black people should be given their hazard pay. They should be equipped with the skills with which to confront the racial abuse that they will likely face within the workplace when they try to proceed. Let's look secondly then Under which side do we affect more change? There's a question again from the floor about how do we play the game. We believe on side proposition that sadly, Black people are all too aware that a game exists, but unfortunately, they were never dealt cards. And if they were given the cards, they were locked away from the table. Ultimately, the paths to progression are based upon relationships that are still king. Psychology even backs up this position by suggesting that people are far more likely to give benefits to those that look like them, that come from a shared background, that are similar to them. Ultimately, if the people at the top are old white men, the people that are promoted are middle-aged white men, not people that look like you or me. But beyond this, I think Kiana explains this most clearly in our debate, and it answers our question about whether this is about race or if it's about class. You'd think that if it was just about class, you'd still see Black individuals at the very top of companies, because we know that some Black individuals are privileged. However, that is not what we've witnessed. There isn't a single Black CEO at the top of the 100 top companies in the UK. There are 3 in the top of the Fortune 500 across the world. This simply isn't the case. It has to be upon race as the missing variable. Remember at the very end of this debate that saying that this is a barrier right now isn't the same as saying these barriers are permanently immobile. And the history of social movements suggests that that is true. Our position is that we should believe the truth, and that's that these are significant barriers to our progression. But we are empowered by that truth to take action. And from recognizing the barriers, we can begin to dismantle them. We're so proud to propose.
Thank you so much for what was a really, really great close to a fantastic debate. And so on that basis, it's my real pleasure to be able to share with everyone the final vote. And so up on the screen at the moment, we are going to turn back to Menti, and you will have the opportunity to give your closing vote. So we know that in the beginning of this debate, it was sided towards the yes side. Now there is another opportunity for people to give their closing votes. And in a moment, I'll be turning to Dr. Jimmy to give us her closing reflections before we finalize who has actually won today's debate. So as this poll continues, I'll warm up Dr. Jimmy, who will come on in a moment and give us her reflections. Following that, we will be hearing from Georgia and another member of the team who will be speaking to us in a moment. So whilst this poll is continuing, and please remember that for those who haven't gone on to Menti yet, the instructions are at the top of the screen. Please go to the site menti.com, entering the code 66192811. The details are in the chat as well if you do need to refer to them. So on that basis, whilst the voting is happening, I'm going to pause and hand over to Dr. Jimmy, please. Sorry, you're on mute at the moment.
Yes, thank you. I got that. Thank you very much, Horatio. I have to say that it's been an enlightening evening. I've really enjoyed listening to both sides. And as much as, you know, the topic is one that is very topical and there's a lot of evidence out there, I think listening to both sides even enrich my understanding, and even, you know, I'm sure the audience would go away with new information and even more kind of, you know, key statistics around what's happening. The argument, you know, the proposition was some of the factors that was highlighted was that race is definitely a significant factor, and that not paying attention to the impact of race can actually have a ripple effect on our, you know, employees' health, you know, the career advancement, and it can also show up in other domains of our lives. So definitely an important issue to pay attention to. The systemic factors that limits Black people shows up even in the society, not just within the organization, but also around, you know, police brutality, the way, you know, Black people are treated in terms of, you know, choices. You want to buy property in a choice area, your access even to finance. Those factors also shows up in different ways. Also, there is that disgracefully low representation of, you know, Black people in Fortune 500 organization at the level of CEO. There is that absence of that. that those are, one of the, factors, put forward by the camp that is proposing. No safety net is available for Black people when they're, in terms of, their choices, because they know that they have nothing to fall back to. So their attitude and the way they manage and conduct themselves in terms of their career is being cautious and being risk averse. And finally, recognizing that race can present multifactorial impact and effect in the way that it limits individuals within organization. And I like the way that, Kenzo finished his final closing by saying that it is akin to sending a firefighter to go and, face a raging fire without equipping that person with the right tools. So when you say that race does not impact or impede career progression, is almost as, sending someone to war without the right tools or armory to fight. The opposition presented equally a very strong case. It started with the motion that race is a mindset issue. It's not real. It's something that is in the shadows, and that why race is actually what you are and not who you are. So when we think about race, it should be considered in terms of focusing on not the race, but to focus on the greater ability that the individual can bring to the organization and ways to actually add value. So rather than the individual focusing on my race is going to be an impediment, that individual should look at ways that they can add value in the organization and focus on, the greater skill that they bring. That then gives them a fighting chance and a better chance to actually excel in the organization. I think another point that was made that I think really stood out for me is not to allow race to become an inhibiting factor, but to look at ways to connect to networks within organizations that allow you have meaningful relationship that then allows you to flourish and, kind of climb the career ladder in the organization. So there is that agreement that we all face inequities, but we choose to rise above it through the mindset that we bring to it. And that would be the way I'll close the opposition.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jimmy. And at this time, I only want to say a really big thank you to you, Dr. Jimmy. Thank you to each of the debaters who have put forward fantastic cases, and a really big thank you also to everyone who has taken time to watch this debate. And you can see on screen at the moment how the debate has shaked out. At this moment in time, it's my real pleasure to call upon Georgia, who is the co-founder of YDWC, to take us through a few words, please.
Thank you, Horatio. So I just want to say, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So I want to say thank you again to all of the debaters, everyone who's partaken in this today. It's been an absolutely incredible debate. I think we've had a lot of sides and a lot of arguments across both sides. And I do think that from looking at the results of the poll, it seems like some opinions, myself included, have been shifted over the course of the debate. I think it's important to actually take a moment just to reflect on some of the things that came out and what we discussed around intersectionality. There were definitely a few questions that remarked on the differences between experiences of people who are coming from Black backgrounds versus Asian backgrounds and other ethnic minority backgrounds, as well as thinking about the impact that race, gender, sexuality, disability play on the outcomes that we see across our professional experiences. And so to that end, I really want to use this as an opportunity to highlight and give you early visibility of a survey that is going to be passed your way in the kind of the following from this event, and really encourage you all to complete this survey to help us as we continue to unpack and explore the issues that are affecting people from ethnic minority backgrounds. Just as a bit of context, this is going to go into the work that we are doing right now with Said Business School to help us basically start to benchmark and create a bit of a baseline to understand what the current experiences, challenges are right now, and then thinking about specifically pinpointing the key improvement areas that we want to be able to address throughout the work that we will be doing and that you would have heard more about from the pack that was sent ahead to you ahead of this session today. I think we had a hand that just went up and has gone down. I'm not sure if that was accidental. But But if not, that is kind of my little bit of a spiel. Again, thank you for joining. And I'm now going to hand over to Musti, who should hopefully be on the call to do a bit on the YDWC retreat that is coming up in July.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Good evening, YDWC. Good evening, people that have attended this fantastic debate. Can I just say, I wish we could be in a room and I could just get everybody to give a massive round of applause. This debate was absolutely phenomenal. Just sitting here and just, hearing the arguments, both sides, hearing everybody speak so eloquently, hearing everybody just put forward such valuable and strong arguments. It is just absolutely phenomenal. So I just want to say big round of applause, everybody. I will give you the individual round of applause, and hopefully everyone else at home is really just giving that round of applause, because honestly, irrespective of which side you sit on, this debate was absolutely phenomenal, and just big kudos to the debaters. I know for a fact I would not want to be going against any of you to debate any issues, because you will definitely talk circles around me. Okay, so as Georgia said, my name is Musti. I am somewhat known as the Chief Enjoyment Officer of the YDWC team. I want to make sure that we can talk about one of the biggest events that we have every single year, which is our virtual summer retreat. Now, of course, we've had to put the virtual in there this year because we can't actually go out and be in person, which is such a shame, because we used to love going out and we'd rent a cabin, and all of us would stay there together and have our own individual rooms and have campfires, and sometimes we'd go for swims in the lake and have all these conversations around us, and we just building friendships, networking, improving our network, and really delving into serious different issues that we go away learning from and we can apply to our own personal lives. But of course, social distancing, lockdown, we're going to have to do this from our homes this year, but that is not going to stop us from having an absolutely fantastic jam-packed event. Okay, so our summer retreat is going to be taking place on the 10th of July. It's going to be a 2-day online retreat. And usually what we do is, like I said, we bring together people from talented backgrounds, diverse backgrounds, and we really go into talking about insightful topics that we can take away, apply to our own lives, and really use to build lasting relationships and do something fun. Honestly, it's just a chance to get away from all the hustle and bustle of everyday life and really focus and push forward for goals and other things that we have learned. Now, our topic for this year's retreat is really going to be in line with the year that we've really all experienced in our own personal way. It's really about caring about oneself, caring about your community, and caring about the future. I don't think I'll be the only one to say that during this pandemic, we've really had to focus on self-care, and we really had to focus on how we're going to get ourselves through the days. And we just really want to talk about a lot of these topics amongst all of us, and really think about how we can take individual issues and bring them back into our personal lives and go forward with a whole brand new network around us. Okay, we just want to reflect, look back at the year, and look inwards at how we can project positivity forward. So some of the previous sessions that we have covered in the retreats, when we could do things in person, was Britain before it was Britain. Was it broken before Brexit? So we had a real in-depth conversation about whether or not Brexit was the thing that broke Britain, or whether Britain being broken caused Brexit, which is phenomenal. We had a fantastic conversation about AI and diversity, and how artificial intelligence was actually being affected by diversity. So, for example, things such as FaceTime, all these other things like that. How is diversity being included in those spaces? We always have a very popular property development session where people were really learning not only how to get onto the property ladder, but also how to become investors within this space also, and build a network of investors around them, so that you can be part of a community that's actually building its own wealth, which is absolutely phenomenal. So this year, we have actually got a session led by an Oxford professor. So we've partnered with the University of Oxford, and this session is going to be focused on executive leadership skills. Okay, we really want to make sure that people take something away from this session, especially people from diverse backgrounds, because we want to make sure that there are enough people with the correct executive leadership skills that is going to push people forward into executive leadership positions. We realize that there is a lot of talent within our community, and sometimes we just don't know how to nurture that talent and bring it out. So we partnered up with Oxford University, and we're going to get one of their top professors to really deliver this session for us, which is going to be phenomenal. We also partnered with a home buying directive to discuss personal investments. Again, this is always a popular session for us every single year. So many of us are trying to get onto the property ladder, not just as homeowners, but also as people that might potentially invest in property as well. And I know many property investors right now are very, very happy about their stamp duty holidays. So they're taking advantage of that. So we're going to be discussing that as well. And one of the biggest feedbacks we always get from people, we ask them one simple question. We say, if you could provide a quote or a recommendation to someone who may attend the retreat next year, what would you say? And a lot of people always say, come with an open mind and look forward to leaving with new partnerships and new perspectives. And that is really what this debate is about. We don't just want to sit here and talk to people. We want people to participate. We want everybody to kind of come along, take some notes that you can apply to your personal life, get in the same room with like-minded people, okay? And if you're in the room with like-minded people, you're able to participate, talk about the same things, and maybe even take away some action points that you can work on outside of this retreat. There is also an open opportunity for peer-to-peer led sessions. So if you have a particular topic that you're passionate about that falls in line with this retreat and falls in line with the theme, you have the opportunity to deliver a bespoke session about the topic that you are passionate about as well. So that is also open. And ultimately, we just want to have fun. In between, we'll introduce some, virtual fun activities and things like that. But ultimately, it's about coming together, caring about our community, caring about the future, and really, really focusing on how we can push forward. Okay. So for a limited period, tickets for members are going to be free. So everybody that is a member of YDWC will have free tickets for a limited period, and tickets for the general public are going to be released on the 14th of April. Okay, so please look out for these tickets. More information is going to be online, and more information will be sent to you after this meeting. But that's it from me. I don't want to take up too much time, but I hope you've enjoyed the evening, and I hope to see you at our virtual summer retreat.
Awesome. So thank you, Musti. And I will close the session off by just saying once again, thank you to everyone who joined. If you aren't already a member of YDWC, we welcome you to these sessions. We look forward to seeing more of you and hope you will be encouraged to join our network soon. We look forward to seeing you at the virtual retreat, as well as getting your responses to the survey. And outside of that, we hope everyone has a lovely week. And congratulations on making it through 1 year of the UK being in some form of lockdown. So well done all. Thank you.